calling the Wednesday, March 13th, 2024 Economic Development Commission meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Tonight's Economic Development Commission meeting will be held hybrid for the public using Zoom. Commission members and staff will be participating in this meeting in person. As chair, I'll be leading the Economic Development Commission meeting, and the public is welcome to participate when invited throughout the meeting. Members of the public may attend the meeting by joining via online Zoom at https://zoom.us/join and typing in meeting ID 876-9938-4690. Once you are logged into the meeting, please use the chat feature to tell the moderator which item you wish to speak to. You may also call into the meeting at 651-372-8299 and enter meeting ID 876-9938-4690. Before we get started today, the Commission wanted to hold a moment of silence in honor of our fallen heroes and our police and fire personnel as we continue to grieve the terrible loss of Officers Elmstrand and Rouge and a firefighter and paramedic Adam Finseth. So please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. The next item on the agenda tonight is the adoption of the agenda. Do any members of the Commission have any changes to the agenda? Staff, do you have any changes to the agenda?
No changes from staff.
May I have a motion for the adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Seconded.
All right. The next item on the agenda is considering approval of the November 8th, 2023 Economic Development Commission meeting minutes. Economic Development Commission members, are there any changes to the minutes? Staff, are there any changes to the minutes?
No changes from staff.
All right, may I have a motion to approve the November minutes?
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion passes.
We have to vote.
Oh, we have to vote?
Yeah, don't we?
Yes. We do?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. It doesn't say a vote, so.
Sorry.
Thank you for telling me.
That's okay.
Okay, well, let's have a vote then. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Nays? All opposed? Okay. Abstained? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Tom Layton, the lead economic developer for Stantec.
Really happy to be here with you today. Thanks for inviting me. What I would like to talk with you about, as you know, is a couple of studies that Stantec, the company that I work for, has been hired by the city of Burnsville to conduct. We're really at a stage in one of these processes where we're looking for some early input and ideas, and so I'm hoping that we can have an informal conversation around some of those topics. But I'll introduce those topics as I go along. Is the slideshow up, or do I have to do something with that?
It's up, so you'll just click from the beginning or current slide.
Okay. Can I expand it? Will that work for
Yep.
folks? Okay.
So it should be on the slideshow tab already. There we go.
There we go. So the structure I was going to use is to talk a little bit about the studies that we've been hired to do. We've done a research phase of both of these studies, and I have a few slides that provide some highlights about how we're seeing the economic context in Burnsville, and so I thought I would to set the stage for our conversation, I thought I would go through just a few of those highlight slides. And then the third part of this agenda is to have a discussion. So moving into that. This is the 5 staff that, Burnsville put out a request for proposal for 2 different studies that, had some relationship, but some firms certainly proposed on one or the other. One was a housing and commercial needs assessment, which was a market analysis that led to an understanding of some of the gaps in, that leads to an understanding of some of the gaps in Burnsville and how you might meet some of those needs for housing and commercial development. The second is an economic development strategic framework that really sets the stage for a new updated economic development strategy for the city of Burnsville. So Stantec proposed on both of these with essentially the same personnel. So on this slide, Adam Jones is the project manager for the economic development strategic framework. Jay Dema is the project manager for the housing and commercial needs assessment, but the rest of the staff are supporting both of those efforts. Again, I'm Tom Layton, second from the left. So just as a quick overview, the housing and commercial needs assessment looks at the demographics of the community, the business context of the community, the existing development inventory, and thinks, and also the market dynamics, and thinks about how what you have for housing and commercial products meets the needs of your community, meets the needs of your workforce. So identifying gaps, mismatches, and teeing up strategies for you to consider in addressing that development context. This work is being done in several stages. We, again, have completed a lot of our research and analysis and moving into more strategic focus. This diagram is also supposed to illustrate the colorful boxes at the top relate to the housing and commercial needs assessment. It's also supposed to illustrate that part of the efficiency we gain by doing both of these studies is the information we're gaining in that study is feeding into our understanding of the economic development context. So it's supporting the other study. In terms of the economic development strategic framework, which will be the focus of our conversation today, we're thinking of that in 3 phases. One is the analysis phase. The second phase is contextualizing that information. Part of how we're doing that is with conversations like this. This is actually the first conversation where we've come out to an important stakeholder, and we know you have an important role in advising the city council and guiding the economic development activities of the city. And talking to a set of stakeholders and gaining their views on economic development needs and opportunities. So that's the phase we're in currently. And again, it tees up a set of strategies that can be considered by yourselves, by the city of Burnsville, for addressing your economic development goals. This is I won't go into detail with this, but this is a calendar associated with the economic development strategic framework, and the hard to read green bar at the bottom talks about some of the touch points with city council, with advisory bodies such as yourselves. So here's where I want to shift and just, and I think it does set the stage for a conversation just to bring out some key findings that, and sort of frame what we're seeing as the economic context in Burnsville. Maybe before I dive into this kind of technical slide, I might just provide this sort of bottom line finding. I actually had the pleasure and privilege of working with Burnsville on your on your comprehensive plan several years ago, and on that basis and on the basis of working on this already, it's clear that Burnsville has an unusually strong and diverse economic base. You've got several business centers or business districts that were built in different eras, support different kinds of businesses. You've got a medical campus. You've got a destination retail district that, has been stronger as a retail asset, but it still has a cluster of retail businesses that are attractive, that are an anchor in the community. You've got natural amenities. You've got transit service. So there's just a wealth for a community, for a suburban community in this position in the region. There's a wealth of assets, of economic assets that you can claim. So a very rich foundation, you've also provided attention to your economic foundation over the years. So you've got a history of being active in that realm. So this first slide starts with a way of characterizing, just at a very high level, what your economic foundation is, and it puts a standard set of sectors at the very right side of this graph, this standard set of business sectors, into four sort of overarching categories. The traditional categories are lower on the chart, the blue collar, you might call the blue collar jobs, manufacturing, construction, agriculture, utilities. Eds, Meds, and Gov is what it sounds like, education and government. The new economy sectors are both higher wage professions, and they're the retail economy, which tend to be lower wage professions. So using that as sort of a big picture way of thinking about a local economy, the next slide looks at the extent to which Burnsville captures more of those economic sectors than the region as a whole on a proportionate basis, or less of those sectors. So the chart at the left tells you that with the blue line, the manufacturing and construction jobs, that Burnsville has 1.4 times the percentage in your economy, your job economy, of those blue-collar jobs than the region as a whole. So you're heavily concentrated in that kind of labor force. You also have more than average of the new economy low-wage jobs. Those are those retail and service jobs. And less than average of Eds, Meds, and Gov, less than average of the high-wage professional jobs. So just a quick way to characterize that economy. Now, those were the jobs that are located within Burnsville. These are the jobs that Burnsville residents hold. And you'll notice, if you're a careful observer and looking at the numbers on the left side of the line chart, you'll notice that they're clustered more closely around the 1, than the other ones. There's more of the other ones range from 1.4 to 0.6. This one ranges from 1.15 to 0.85. So your residents really are represented in a more average basis in the regional economy. Burnsville is, this is a slide, if you look at the circles on the right, this is a slide that shows Burnsville as a job destination. Most suburban cities do not have more jobs than workers. But there are more people who commute to Burnsville to work than live in Burnsville and work outside of Burnsville. So it's job rich in that sense. I have a chart here that shows where they are commuting to on the right, where they are commuting from on the left, and there's some interesting distinctions there.
Can I see that
Yes.
again really quick? Thanks.
So some of the even further outlying cities are origins of your workers, like Lakeville and Apple Valley. But those who are commuting from Burnsville are often going in towards the city.
Yeah. That makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah. So just to wrap up sort of an overview here, and maybe this loops back to where I started, that you have a very strong diversified job base. Your export sectors, those manufacturing sectors are fairly stable. They're not in a growth phase. You don't have land to attract more businesses, a lot of land to attract more businesses, so that's not a surprise. The job growth has been strongest in the lower wage service industries and in healthcare, and underscoring that you contribute to the regional economy. The only additional slide from our, we have 80 observations in our analytical phase. The only additional slide I included here is this one because it shows a couple of things. One, the subject of this is the era in which housing was constructed in Burnsville. If you look at the very left cluster of bars, you'll see that a cluster of bars that shows the era of housing construction from pre-1940 to the most recent one is 2000 to 2001. Most of Burnsville's housing stock was heavily concentrated between 1960 and 2000. And a little more tightly concentrated in that area than a number of comparison cities and obviously the Twin Cities as a whole. So that gives you, what point in the life cycle of that housing most of the housing stock is in Burnsville. The other reason I wanted to show this slide is we've got a number of slides like this that compare Burnsville to both Dakota County and the Twin Cities, but also to some comparison cities. So you might find those interesting on a number of parameters to see where Burnsville lines up demographically and economically. So that was just the real quick, some initial observations about Burnsville economy, Burnsville's development stock, and we can move into a conversation. Are we doing that at this point?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Beth. I have two slides I'm using just to focus the conversation. The first slide is this one, and the writing is a little bit small, but what I think is an interesting way to sort of generate some thinking about economic development is to think about what does it mean. And what's interesting to me as someone who practices in this area is if you work on economic development with one city, they might be prioritizing tourism and high density development. You work with another city, they might be emphasizing attracting certain industrial sectors or adding more processing of raw materials, or so very business focused or industrial focused things. Or they may be bringing out, maybe saying we need high-speed internet to be successful, something in the infrastructure realm. So I think it's interesting to think about, well, and the other thing I'll say on this is I went back to the comprehensive plan, economic development chapter of that plan, and I went back to what was written the next year, the economic development strategic plan, your current strategic plan. And those two documents emphasized quite different categories on this chart. So part of our job, and be really interested to hear from you, what you think the priorities are for Burnsville now, today. Part of our job is to think about what business you want to be active in, which is partly about which of these do you think is important for supporting your economy, and part of it is about which of these is the proper role for the city of Burnsville's economic development staff. So I'm just going to mention these topical areas, and we're going to, before I open it up for comments, I'm going to give an overview on the next slide about the kind of overall input we're looking for. Then we may loop back to this, or we may start in another area. So we're talking about business-related strategies, very traditional focus of economic development programs. That can be funding for expansion, it can be recruiting businesses, it can be the business visitation programs. Workforce skill buildings in a rapidly changing economy to retrain people can be a core part of keeping your economy vibrant. Infrastructure we talked about, real estate development we touched on. business district activation, placemaking, think of this as heart of the city, creating places that have value to your community and are attractive to the community. Tourism, marketing, identity building, I think defines itself. As you get broader in thinking about economic development, some even think about, well, we need to provide more affordable housing to attract the workforce we're looking for. Or if we have better childcare programs, we can have more people enter the labor force. And human development is the very broadest. It's having strong schools. It's making sure that every child builds their creativity, builds their problem-solving skills, and can be a functional member of the workforce. So that's that overview. I promise I'm almost done talking. So this is just a layout of the topics that we would love to get input on. And we won't get to all of these. Okay, on the right is some of these topical focus areas. If that jogs something in your mind about something Burnsville's doing well or something Burnsville needs, we can talk about that. I thought we would start on the left and get people's thoughts on the strengths and weaknesses of Burnsville's economy. And I really want to make sure that we get to what you see are the challenges that Burnsville faces in that regard and what you think are key opportunities that we can focus this next round of economic development strategies on. So I'm done talking. And so I want to open it up, and I think maybe one way to start, just to make sure that you all have an opportunity to get involved right away. I think one way to start would be to invite each of you to say one thing that this sort of big spiel prompted in your mind, whether it's a challenge or an opportunity or a topical area that you think would be important to keep in mind for Burnsville. And I realize that I left my notebook over there, so while we start, I'm going to go grab my notebook so I can take notes. Can we start here?
Definitely. I think that one of the weaknesses that we're undergoing in the city of Burnsville is the lack of available land to develop. And I don't think that there's any real way to overcome that. And I think that rather than develop a new infrastructures, I think we need to look at remodeling, renovation of existing. That's one of the key areas that I'm looking at.
I kind of see what you mean, because I've been noticing even when I take my daughter to pre-K at Diamond Head, and all those apartment buildings that are going up in such a small amount of space is really it looks kind of crowded, like, and then that makes you wonder, is there a way to continue building housing without having to have it look so much like a concrete jungle, especially in the heart of the city where it's kind of got this, sort of reputation for being a really beautiful area, and now it's being obscured. You can't really see it because we've got these buildings going up. And it's not to say we shouldn't have these buildings, but I sort of feel the same way that maybe the land use could be, I don't know, looked at. I don't know if it could be different, but.
Well, that might be a planning department issue.
They overlap a lot.
I think it's all fair game at this point. So what I heard from you is the land is a constraint.
Correct.
It's a challenge, yeah.
I was looking at one of your slides, and it says that new economy, high wage jobs, if I'm reading it right, seem to be down a fair amount over the last decade. I'm curious if there's any insight as to what's driving that in particular.
I can't say that we have a clear answer to that. Those are mainly office-based jobs, and I know that region-wide there has been a shift in the region where there's been some reduction in some of those professions. So it's not unique to Burnsville. There are also in areas, and again, I don't know that this is true specifically for Burnsville, but in areas there are office buildings that are emptying out. Folks are looking for smaller spaces, with people working remotely and as their leases come due. So it could be that some of the footprint, some of the building footprint that supports those kind of jobs has been reducing. Those are just some thoughts why that may be happening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One of the interesting aspects was the high percentage of blue-collar jobs that are specifically in Burnsville. And
Yeah.
I think typically, especially in this day and age, some cities may see like a high percentage of blue-collar jobs as a detraction, but I think we have to acknowledge that we have to make that an asset.
Yeah.
And so it's really trying to figure out in terms of, especially when you're looking at educating the next generation of students.
Yeah.
Blue collar jobs can be very, very advantageous, especially if you're, technical college training, those different jobs that may not necessarily require a 4-year education. So I think specific strategies in terms of, how do we maximize that thinking that may already be in our community that, you can get a blue collar job and have a really successful future and build a successful family. So really kind of using that as an asset and framing that as an asset is, I think, really, really important going
Yeah.
forward.
For a young person that is interested in those careers, Burnsville might be a great place to grow up,
Sure.
right?
Right, and has been historically.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Similar in that line, I'm seeing the strengths that you represented with the broad economic, environment here is good. The weakness I see is around the edges, the enrichment factors you're talking about. Retail, opportunities, and also that, the real estate piece adds into that. If you're running out of land to build on, that's also an enrichment issue, because you're not able to give people better opportunities, nicer places to live. The question what I didn't see in there was the demographics. I see the economic demographics,
Yeah.
but the age demographics, anecdotally, I see Burnsville as kind of a mix of younger families, single people, and then a lot of, senior citizens like me.
Yeah.
Do you see that in your study? Where is it going? Is it trending more young, or is it trending, and that senior demographic going down, and how does that play into your
Yeah,
plans?
I included a kit of slides in case there were questions that I could respond to like that. This is, for example, a slide that shows the Burnsville on the left, and you've got a cluster again that shows the segment of the population that's in different age bands. And just visually, it looks like Burnsville, to me, Burnsville has a very similar demographic mix to the Twin Cities as a whole. You are well represented in those middle-aged and senior years. You're maybe slightly more represented in the middle-aged and senior years and slightly less represented with children, but you have to be looking pretty closely to see that. So I think you've got, it looks like you've got a broad demographic mix moving in here with a population of a lot of different ages, and I assume household, here, this is one that focuses on household types. And you're a little overrepresented compared to the third column, the Twin Cities as a whole, little overrepresented in married without children and live alone. And a little less represented in families with children. But again, those are sort of fine distinctions. It's pretty close to an average demographic mix for the Twin Cities.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
Married without children, does that mean they've never had children, or they just don't have children in the home
They
currently?
don't have children currently. Yeah. So oftentimes those are your empty nesters.
Are single-parent households represented under other family types?
Yes.
And one question for me is there a specific reason why you don't have Lakeville on these charts?
We had a conversation about communities to compare to, and, there are pros and cons about looking at a lot of different communities. Lakeville.
I'm just saying because Lakeville is an adjoining city, we
Yeah.
border each other, we
Yep.
share school districts, 'cause
Yeah.
there's, And I would have thought that would have been important to include this.
Yeah, well, it does sound like it would be a good point of comparison, yeah. Where do we leave off here?
Right here.
Okay, I'll go back to the questions page.
As far as the housing again, I'd be interested in seeing more development in townhome and condos rather than apartments. That would provide opportunities for young people to build equity and hopefully take over the home stock and improve it in the future, 10, 20 years out.
Yeah,
So I-
so you see that as an opportunity. Okay.
I have a couple of thoughts and comments. First of all, because our business is located in Eagan and we're really active in Eagan as well, we do keep abreast of similar types of conversations at the Eagan city level. And I would say one of the advantages Burnsville has is we don't have to face the issues of like Egan's losing Thomson Reuters, Egan's lost Blue Cross Blue Shield. Those are huge impacts.
Right.
And while we do have a lot of eggs in the Burnsville Center basket, it's only one situation of that, and it has an otherwise pretty vibrant retail area surrounding it that has held up, even as mall culture has certainly taken a swan dive, though exciting developments and
Yeah.
new information about what's coming at Burnsville Center looks like we're going to be able to see a revitalization to what that can mean for our community. But I would say if we're looking at what's next, being careful to keep it that way and not get into a situation where we've got so much invested in one employer and one stakeholder who's got so much sway on what our tax base looks like, what our land use looks like, who are appealing residents to draw to the community. Because when those shake up, which you cannot control, it is really impactful and it leaves a lot of chaos. So that's one place.
That's a
for-
great observation, and I think there's something inherently stable over the long run about having the business districts, the industrial parks that you have in Burnsville that are, some are relatively bigger buildings, but not the campuses that you have in Eagan. So, if a business moves out, there's likely to be another tenant that can move in. And I think that's a good, stable situation.
Yeah, absolutely. How does your research show, or how do you factor in the changes in a lot more work from home opportunities? How does that affect how you calculate or determine that sort of jobs versus tenant or residents calculation? How do you determine that? And then the other data piece I want to know that I don't want to forget that I want to know is, do you have any comparative information with other areas in the region on housing size, like average property sizes? Again, because if we're looking at a lot of your higher wage earning new economy jobs, those are work from home jobs. And so if we don't have a housing stock that can appeal to those residents, then they shan't be moving here and sending their kids to our schools and buying things down the street at our stores and participating in our economy. So I'd love to see some comparisons on that as well.
Yeah. With regard to working from home, I don't believe my coworker, Spencer Cox has done this research. I don't believe that we found something specifically about that. I think that it's fair to think that a lot of office-based jobs, tend to be losing people's presence
Yeah.
on the site.
So if my data point is I have an office-based job and my employer's base of operations is Minneapolis, whether I go to Minneapolis or not, you're probably catching me as a Minneapolis employee. Is
Yeah,
that-
I would
that's
think so.
accurate?
Yeah,
Okay.
right, I would imagine. Another strength of Burnsville relates to that, though, is that the industrial sectors, the blue-collar sectors, are more likely to have people come physically to Burnsville, you know, and they're commuting through here, they're seeing Burnsville, they might be buying stuff sometimes, as well as the hospital personnel. Yeah, so if I think about the four anchors here, well, and retail staff, they got to be there too. So if I think about the main anchors in Burnsville and the main anchor districts, they all lend themselves to actually working in that location.
In your Venn diagram, though, it seemed like there was very, very few people that live in Burnsville and work in
Yeah,
Burnsville.
isn't that something? I would say that's not very unusual. You know, people don't necessarily think if I live in Burnsville, I gotta work in Burnsville, and, you know.
Well, and
they're-
Burnsville has an asset in location in that you can jump on a highway within, you know, about 90 seconds and you're on a major highway and minutes away from another place
Yeah.
to be employed. So, you know, even that seem very far away because of our location in the highway systems, it's
But in
very
your
quick.
viewpoint, what drives the city's economic growth? Is it to keep the people that live in the community to work in the community, like a large city like Minneapolis, for instance?
I
Or
think
is it
there
to
is a
go ahead
benef-
and live in the community and work somewhere else?
I think there is a benefit to having housing that meets the needs of your workforce. Because if your workforce also lives in the city, you know, then they have another level of attachment to the city. They have more opportunity to spend in the city. So I think that is a valid goal.
So in your professional opinion, then, we should try to keep more of the people that live in Burnsville to work in Burnsville?
I would say maybe the other way around. I think people can have more flexibility sometimes in where they work than in where in where they live than in where they work. So we usually think in terms of thinking about you have the right housing to support your workforce. One of the comments here was we need some executive housing to capture people who are, you know, in those, you know, leadership in an office sector job. Yeah.
How do you, can you tell me about your methodology? How do you know how many people are working outside of Burnsville but live here specifically?
This comes from a census report. I think it says on the map here, but on the map itself is sort of a data portal that draws from two different surveys the Census Department makes, and it's reports from business establishments themselves that talk about their workforce and where they come from.
You know, do they capture like work from home or even hybrid? Because I think that from what you're saying, even with talking about that advantage of living and working in Burnsville, if you live in Burnsville and you work remotely or even hybrid in Burnsville, that means you're spending, you know, your lunch hour here. That means, I work in Minneapolis. If I need to make a run to Target, I usually do that on my lunch break in Minneapolis, you know? So if somebody's working from home, I think that could be valuable data if it's as important as you say to economic development.
Yeah, and I don't think they capture that yet. But it wouldn't surprise me if they start to do that, because it's becoming more of a factor.
Well, especially since this is through 2002 to 2020, and working from home is a recent phenomena because of the pandemic.
It will mean more of a burden on business reporting to say where your employees come from and how many days a week do they spend in the office, right? Yeah.
Tom,
I was just going to add to, I think it's a valid economic development goal to provide housing that meets the needs of your workforce, but also to maintain sort of a realism about that, you know, people have lots of different reasons for where they live, where they work, and, you know, you will always have more of your workers living outside Burnsville, no matter how aggressive you are with your policies, and vice versa.
So from a look-back perspective, specifically at the data, you're saying that this would not be atypical if it was seen in neighboring cities or even similar-sized cities, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we've done housing studies recently in Venice Heights and New Brighton and Shoreview and see similar things.
I just have one more
Yeah.
comment, or I think in one of the slides right before the sort of question slide, it had that overview of different economic development. Yes, this. So is this saying that like human development, those sorts of goals are like peripheral goals to overall impact in economic
I think
development?
they're fundamental.
Okay.
I think they're fundamental, but I think that oftentimes when people are defining economic development, they will be defining that more tightly. Or if they're defining the function that their economic development, municipal function, wants to take on, they'll define it more narrow than that.
Okay.
But I think it's fundamental in terms of, it's one of the most basic things we can do to have an economy that continues to grow and thrive, and that is to pay attention to our human capacity.
And are you seeing other economic development initiatives in other cities focusing in on, let's say, like high-quality education in terms of economic development?
No, I don't typically.
Okay.
It's typically outside of what they define for themselves. Now, having said that, your current economic development strategy pays an awful lot of attention to the well-being of the school district. So this is one of the few communities that has a document that really does focus on that aspect of economic development, and I credit you for it.
That's all I had.
Yeah. Well, great first thoughts. Shall we, I don't know how much time we have for a conversation.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
On the previous slide, does your analysis include strengths and weaknesses on those different points? Like, for example, electrical capacity under infrastructure. Is there a current analysis that says how the city's doing?
We're trying to get a baseline of what is going on in most of these sectors, yes. And the thing we're trying to do with these conversations is understand where folks like yourselves think the opportunity is for doing more, paying closer attention, and which of these areas there might be challenges.
Thank you. From my perspective, I think that infrastructure is quite important, and I think that I'm not surprised to see it so close to the left side of this diagram,
Yeah.
because that is a place that the government does have a more significant voice as a stakeholder to influence, and there's less if we don't have electrical capacity in the area, there's not much small businesses can do about that, because that really comes down to the power distributors and the transmission lines, and
Yeah.
small companies don't build transmission lines.
Do you have some information about challenges in that area?
I don't. I'm
Okay.
just curious.
Okay. When I think about Burnsville and infrastructure, some of the things that I, can be confident saying is on the transportation side, you have very convenient access to the regional transportation network. On the transit side, you have, growing transit service. So those are important infrastructure elements. I don't know if there are issues with electrical capacity, but those are some things that we can talk to when we talk to folks that are in the industrial parks and say, are there limitations here that we should be aware of?
Tom, one last question. Under workforce needs, you have attainable housing. I don't think that necessarily wholly encompasses affordable housing. And usually we look at affordable housing as having some type of, government subsidy. But if you're talking what's specifically attainable, I go back to your previous slides about the existing housing stock from, the 50s and the 60s. So will your analysis include kind of like, a review of the existing housing stock, the availability of that housing stock, and especially for first-time home buyers, emerging families that are looking for something that's a little bit on the more affordable end, especially given current interest rates?
The housing and commercial needs analysis will definitely look at that. this terminology gets tricky. Partly because some of these terms aren't defined very well, and partly because different communities have different sensitivities about how you talk about these. In this particular mile that I put together, I'm using workforce needs, in an informal sense. I'm using attainable housing in an informal sense. I think workers need, to meet their household needs, they need housing at different affordability levels, including, what we might think of as regulated, affordable, rent-restricted, income qualified housing. That's an important housing stock for, a lot of the labor force. In a community like this, we can expect that, maybe as much as a third of the population, or it could be more, are paying more than 30% of their household income on their housing costs. So that's the term for that is housing cost burden. I probably even have that slide in here. So just inherently, there are a number of people that would be better off if they could find housing that costs less. So building affordable housing is a benefit to any of these local communities. It often meets community resistance, but it's a benefit to any of these local communities.
Do you have any data on vacancy rates here in Burnsville and how they compare with other cities in terms of the new building that's gone on?
Yeah, my coworkers who are working on that the housing needs analysis would have that information by now. I don't think I have that in the slide deck.
How do we get access to the analyses that you've performed?
We can give it to you.
Perfect.
A couple of these I think are at a page, we'll work with Beth and Jeff and others to make sure that they're comfortable with the state of them, but at that point in time, we don't need to wait for a final report if it's accurately reflecting the information, we can get it to you. Yeah, and I think you'll find it interesting. Let me ask a related question that zeroes in on the economic development activities of the city of Burnsville. And are there things that that you think the city is doing well in terms of supporting the economic function of the city? Or things that you would be interested to see them do more with? In that question, I'm taking as an assumption that being the Economic Development Commission, you probably have a pretty good understanding of the things that the city is doing with respect to economic development. So are there things that you feel are being addressed well, and are there things that have been in your mind that you feel like it could grow in or branch into? And I don't think we need to go around the room for that.
Well, I can tell from experience that I think the city is doing a great job in trying to attract new business and welcoming new business when they come into town. Whether it's Jamba Juice and Auntie Anne's, or whether it's Boot Barn, or any of these other new businesses that are coming to the city of Burnsville. I think they do a fantastic job of welcoming them. And it probably goes back to that, the new program that they started, You Belong Here. And it's not just as a resident, but I think it transcends to all kinds of businesses.
Yeah, great comment.
I think that goes hand in hand with having a really excellent relationship and a really symbiotic relationship with the Chamber of Commerce that helps city staff stay at the forefront, and vice versa helps them keep the chamber at the forefront of what changes are happening in Burnsville economically. It's a really good relationship that the two groups have to help serve each other, which is unique
Yeah, that's good to
to
hear.
what I've seen. And I think that the city does a good job of communicating and giving opportunities to listen. in particular. Every event that we ever go to by the city also has, an abundance of city departments and organizations in attendance to both share out what they do, but also to hear back what the community really needs from them, or they might have a whole designed setup to help receive feedback about a transportation plan that's under consideration, so that they're giving really concrete ways to share that information while you're going there to have a social experience within your city. And so I think that Burnsville does a really good job of trying to welcome that information and to put themselves in front of the community's face so that they have an opportunity to share it and they don't have to go out of their own way. Because often we're just too busy to be always aware of what the plan is. But if you're there when we're at the park and listening to a band with our kids, and then we also get to talk to these city employees, it's a really useful way to hear from the community.
That's great. And that signals that residents are valued and their views are valued, and business owners are valued and their views and needs are valued. Thank you.
I would echo that comment. It does seem like the city does a great job in engaging with the community. And I think that particularly the heart of the city, that they've been focusing on the development and bringing things there. I think that's been going very well.
I'll echo my colleague's earlier statement about the city's, mantra of "you belong here." I mean, when I purchased my home here in early 2021, I mean, seeing that on the water tower, was really more than just, it really was kind of like an unofficial welcome to the city, right? And buying my first single-family home was really important to, okay, this is a community that you really do feel like you belong. And I agree that, the city is always front and center in terms of really centering the voices of the community and elevating those voices and, promoting feedback, active feedback too. So not just from a business perspective, but even going into the future, whether you're looking at those condominiums or single-family homes, I mean, really kind of focusing on that you do belong here and kind of, furthering that message, I think is really important, but the city does a fantastic job at that currently.
Yeah. Great.
I think we like living in Burnsville.
Your Burnsville's booster.
Well, I grew up here.
Okay.
When my parents moved to Burnsville in 1964, Burnsville was a village. And it was almost ready to be annexed by the city of Bloomington. So it's something that most people probably don't know. And that's why in 1964, the city clerk decided it was time to incorporate as a city to ward off Bloomington.
That's interesting. Are there, I think haven't heard opportunities for stretching into new areas or expanding
I think
programs?
something that I've noticed is like a couple of these sites, for example, the used to be a Chinese restaurant right on Burnsville Parkway and 35W, or there's this it's currently like a Mexican restaurant on Highway 13 close to the Savage border that both of those places are just like revolving business doors that nobody seems to be successful in those spots, even though, one of them's right on 35W, one of them is right on 13. They're in good locations, but they're being missed somehow. And I wonder if there's any opportunity to keep a business in either of those locations, or if it's something, maybe there's a prerogative to try something else there. Maybe those businesses are just not gonna ever take off in those locations, and we think about using the land for something else, or I don't know. But in the meantime, while the buildings are there, it would be, nice to see something stay for longer than a couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I live over near that area, actually, so, and I've been there for 40 years. And that area, so say west of heart of the city, right exactly where it's been difficult for many years.
Even all those strip malls that are down on 13, all those businesses are revolving doors, and it's,
You mean over by 11,
yeah.
Okay.
No, wait,
towards Savage?
towards Savage, yeah. Yeah, particularly that Mexican restaurant, like right by the there's like a church right next to it.
Oh,
It's-
yeah.
Yeah, it's like that
It's
building.
like a black hole.
Yeah, it's such a nice big building.
It
It's
is,
right on
yeah.
13. It totally makes sense that there's a restaurant there, and I don't understand why nobody ever goes there. There's never anyone in the parking lot. And then you can tell because, you go back there the next year and it's a completely different restaurant because somebody else is, shooting their shot with it. And yeah, we just have a number of those like black hole locations, and I wonder if there's any sort of initiative to, you belong here. Well, it doesn't feel like it if your business fails, within the first couple of years, so,
Some kind of ritual to lift the curse.
yeah.
Do you go there?
No, I don't, nobody else goes there, so I don't want to go.
Restaurants are
I'm not positive of the demographic data, but it seems like the majority of the people that live in the city are concentrated much further south. So that's not to say there's no people there, but it is really close to
That's where
the
I
industrial
live.
zoning.
Yeah.
And logistically, I don't think it's easy to get in and out of, or convenient. You
Yep.
know what I mean? You're moving east and west there.
Well, since I live over there, if other people went there, then I would go.
Right.
Okay, but, so then
Yeah,
it would
no,
be
I hear you.
convenient for me, but I
Be the
won't.
change you wanna see.
I can't, but,
Would you like to start a restaurant?
no, I don't want to start a restaurant.
So if there are properties that seem over the long run to not be viable, certainly, one conclusion you could draw is that there are some, issues that make it difficult and, redevelopment to something else may make sense in a location
and I
like
think
that.
that's
But
good.
but I don't know the property at all, so I'm,
Well, you made a good point though, too. I think that, I was in the hospitality industry for many years, and restaurants, a restaurant that opens today has got about 10% chance of being open 2 years from now. That's a fact. Restaurants are just a tough industry to be in. And so maybe the idea is not for it to be a restaurant, but for it to be something else.
And I think that's something that could come out of the housing and commercial inventory that's being done. Learning what properties could be underutilized or maybe are being underinvested in, potentially learning why that is, and then that can further guide the city on policy direction on, is that a grant program that we need to have? Is there a rezoning of the property to allow more flexible uses? And so the information that Stantec is gathering for us will be put into a usable format to help guide those discussions, not only with you all, but with our planning commission if it's zoning related, and then with city council as well.
So it's a good time to say thank you for all the great input. Thank you for all the great input. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Beth, if you could send out the research that they've done, I would love to read that.
Yes, I will verify what state it's in and share it as soon as we're able.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, thanks again, Tom. We are going to move to the next item on the agenda, which is a presentation by Natalie Musso, MCCD Open to Business Advisor.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. What a treat to get to hear all these details about Burnsville as I was waiting. So really interesting data to see. So
Natalie, do you have any restaurant owners who are really looking
the
for a
wheels were turning,
space?
trust me, I'm gonna look at that space and see. But also very valid point about maybe that's just not a great space for a restaurant. So, yeah, really interesting discussion. My name is Natalie Mulso. I am here talking with you tonight at the invitation of Beth Weber and the Economic Development Team here at the city. I am a business advisor and I work for the Open to Business program for MCCD. And I've been the business advisor for the city of Burnsville and for all of Dakota County for about 4 years. So today, I'll be talking a little bit about the program. I see some new faces here, so I'll give you just a really quick summary about what we do, and then talk about what was accomplished in the past year in Dakota County for the program, get into some Burnsville specifics about what was accomplished here, and then we'll hear about a couple of clients that we worked with and just really attach some faces kind of to the work that we did, and then we will look ahead and see what is coming up this year. So before I jump into the stats, maybe I'll go back. But yeah, before I jump in, so the program really is a two-pronged approach to supporting new and existing businesses. The first prong would be direct technical assistance. So that is one-on-one assistance, sitting down with an entrepreneur who's looking to start a business, or an existing business that is looking to grow or maybe experiencing a challenge. So I would meet with them at their place of business. I meet with a lot of startups at the library. We reserve a meeting room, and really just kind of get down to the basics. Whatever they need, we meet clients where they're at in terms of their skill level, in terms of what their goals are. Not everyone is looking to build an empire. A lot of people I work with are, they've got families, single moms, they've got their kids, they've got other jobs, and they're doing things at night and on the weekends for extra income, or really for that next stage. So that is the one-on-one technical assistance. The other prong is access to capital. So we are a direct lender. We have our own loan funds. It's about a $10 million loan fund. Funding from a variety of sources, including the U.S. Department of the Treasury. We do fundraising on our own, and then we get loan dollars from DEED at the state level, and then banks invest in our loan fund, and then we relend that money out. So we pay interest rate on that, and then we relend it out, and then eventually pay back those funds. It's a revolving model. So in addition to the direct loans that we make, we also work really closely with bank partners to provide facilitate capital in other ways. So introducing them to banks, helping them secure funding that way, helping them, write a business plan so that they can go and make their presentation to the bank. Also researching grant opportunities and helping them kind of put together that capital stack to get them to open their doors or to expand. So that's the program as a whole. MCCD is a nonprofit organization. We have been serving the Twin Cities and the surrounding region for more than 35 years. The Open to Business program really, it does serve every business, but we acknowledge that there are groups of folks that have been historically excluded from more kind of traditional financial markets or traditional options. So that really is our target market. We want to be accessible to BIPOC entrepreneurs, immigrant business owners, women business owners, anyone who wouldn't necessarily feel like they could walk in, to a bank and have a conversation about getting a loan, and might feel intimidated by that. So that is the program as a whole. And so what does this mean for Dakota County? So last year I served 168 businesses throughout the county and about 1,300 hours of direct technical assistance. So that's that one-on-one time with business owners in the county. We had a split of about 60-40 startup businesses versus existing businesses. Usually it is more like 50-50, so it's interesting to see that there was a lot of confidence last year and a lot of folks looking to get started. 49% women-owned businesses, 51% BIPOC-owned, and 38% low-wealth-owned business owners or entrepreneurs. Referrals come from a mix of sources, word of mouth, banks, partners. A lot of folks just Google us, and then obviously, the city picks up the phone when businesses call, or the CDA at the county level, and they would send businesses our way. So for Burnsville specifically, I worked with 26 businesses last year, and they received over 250 hours of direct technical assistance. So it's a huge number of hours, I think definitely more than we did the year prior, and that was just because of some of the different projects that these clients were working on. 60-40 split again. Interesting to see though that the demographic mix is different from Dakota County as a whole. 73% of the businesses I worked with here were BIPOC owned, so that's Black, Indigenous, or people of color owned or immigrant owned. 54% women owned, so again, more than you saw Dakota County as a whole. 46% were low wealth owned businesses, and 23% fell into all three of those categories. So I do think that that's interesting to think about, you know, who's reaching out for help, who's calling the city for guidance. When you think about, you know, the big picture economic plan for your city, you know, definitely think about who's reaching out for help. Referrals came a lot from banks, 54%, so more than half, 31% from the city, and then 15% from the web or from other sources. So a lot of word of mouth. I think this is a really tightly knit community here in Burnsville, and you know, people want to work with folks that they trust. So in terms of lending and access to capital, Dakota County as a whole, about $600,000 in direct lending. That's lending that we did as an organization. That was leveraged by $750,000-ish dollars in owner equity. So that's the capital that the business owner is investing in their business. And then that was further leveraged by about $3 million in other funds. That would be, you know, bank financing, traditional financing, SBA financing, grants as well. So for about every dollar that MCCD invested in this business, about $5.25 was leveraged from other sources. We're trying to talk about our interest rates more because, as you can see, our rates are very low compared to what you could find, you know, walking into a bank. We're below the prime rate right now. We have been at, you know, capped at 7% for, I think, about 2 years. It's a decision that we made a couple of years ago because we really wanted to put our money where our mouth is when we talk about our mission as an organization, and really practicing a non-extractive lending model where we want businesses to keep their money in their pockets, and we don't need to charge a huge spread on our loans. You know, we just charge absolutely the bare minimum that we can, honestly, for these deals that we're doing. And we subordinate our position to the bank and to the SBA, so we're really kind of last in line in a lot of these projects. But that's, you know, that's what we're here for. That is our mission. We want to provide low-cost capital, and we want these businesses to be able to grow and expand without paying really high interest rates. So in Burnsville specifically, we lent about $125,000 from our loan funds. That was leveraged by $196,000 in owner equity and almost $2.5 million in access to capital. So this is just a huge number in terms of the leverage. It was quite a large project as well. So exciting to see. And in terms of who we served in Burnsville, this is really just a short list of a few folks recently, but there's a startup brewery, a new dress boutique, hopefully opening in Burnsville this year. Speaking about, you know, retail businesses and the heart of the city, that'll be a fun one to see. Also a startup wine bar and restaurant. There's a commercial builder as well that I was talking with. A face painting business, so this is one of those kind of like side hustle businesses that I was talking about. An expanding business, that's car detailing, and then an expanding healthcare clinic that I've been working with for quite a long time, and they are just searching for real estate to expand. So here is a client highlight to kind of put a face to the projects that we're working on. So this is Asian Mart. In Burnsville. They opened in 2019. This is a growing business, And they wanted to add new business lines. They really loved their space in Burnsville and their customer base there, but they were just completely maxed out. I don't know if any of you have visited. I know Beth has. But there is a lot going on in that store, and they just didn't have enough room to add. They wanted to do importing and a bunch of other things, and it just didn't work out with the layout of the store. So they needed a second space, and really to support that Burnsville location. So they're expanding. They're doing a new space in South St. Paul to support the Burnsville location, and that's opening later this year. But it really will be a boon to this Burnsville location, which is kind of their starting place and really where they want to keep their focus as well.
Excuse me, is that at 13 and Clef?
I believe,
located?
No, it's over off of County Road 42 in the Wood Park Plaza area.
there's one with a really similar name.
Yeah.
That's caused some confusion for him, yes. So from the business owner, his name is Watson, he said MCCD makes the loan process smooth from initial consultation to closing. They have the heart to help small minority businesses like us. We greatly appreciate their support. Another highlight, this is Trove Brewing, which opened late last year in Burnsville. This is a startup brewery founded by a really seasoned kind of industry professional guy. He's been brewing for a long time, working different breweries locally, but also out west. And they have this gorgeous space. Worked with them on technical assistance, helping them write a business plan and get ready to kind of make their pitch to the bank. I think they ended up working with Choice Bank, and they got some SBA financing. So just really cool to see them open their doors. Finally, I know it's been kind of a long time coming for them from the planning stages to see their beautiful space. So highly recommend you check it out. They've got great events, great food trucks, and great beverages too. So for outreach and updates, just a few things that's been on my radar this past year and will continue to be. Do a lot of outreach to local lending partners, thinking about the banks here in Burnsville, work a lot with US Bank. Huntington Bank is a partner of ours as well, Old National Bank. There was talk about the chamber earlier and how wonderful they are in supporting businesses. A lot of referrals kind of go back and forth, so maybe a business talks to me first and then I get to introduce them to the chamber and the other way around, but it's really all kind of part of that ecosystem that supports new businesses here and existing businesses too. Also last year, MCCD was approved to participate in a new program from DEED that's called the Small Business Loan Participation Program, and it's a credit initiative that includes loan participation but also a loan guarantee that kind of functions like some of the SBA programs that you might be aware of. But it's a great tool in our toolbox because we're an approved lender now. We can work with them and it will help us do more riskier deals, basically, because either they're participating, so they're lowering our exposure, or they're providing a 30% guarantee. So it's just another way for us to get dollars out the door to businesses. Also last year, we received a grant award from the SBA for the PRIME program, which stands for Program for Investment in Micro Entrepreneurs. So this is for really super micro businesses, just 1 or 2 employees, including the owner, and they're disadvantaged micro entrepreneurs. So this is for technical assistance and to provide workshops, which we started to do at our offices this year too, which I mentioned further down. We also rolled out a business resource newsletter, which this goes out monthly to all of our clients and then any other contacts locally that want to keep informed as to business grants or trainings or any programs that are out there, or information that businesses can use. Similar, I think, to some of the e-blasts that you might see from local chambers, but I think it's more specific to just kind of tools and trainings for businesses. So that's a really fun one. Again, we send that out monthly or more often if there's kind of like timely information that we need to get out. I personally have expanded my office hours, so now I'm available 5 days a week to meet with clients. Again, meeting with people all over, whether it's virtual over Zoom, sometimes that's easier for people, a lot of meetings at the library, and meeting people at their place of business too. And then looking ahead, so our lending goal this year is to lend $3 million. That's, I think it's about 500,000 more than we did last year, and this is across all of our territories. So we're in Dakota County, but we're also throughout the Twin Cities region. We are keeping our interest rates capped at 7%, and I mentioned that earlier. We want to do that for as long as we possibly can, and we are being strategic about fundraising so that we can do that. Really kind of back to basics, focusing on client work, increasing accessibility to clients as well, meeting people where they're at. We've got the workshops coming up, and just continuing with outreach and advertising. And with that, I will pause for any questions that there might be. Yes.
I noticed that in all of your information, you didn't have any notation that you work with SCORE. So do you work with SCORE, or, I would think that would be a great resource for anybody that's starting a business.
Yes, so we love to work with SCORE. And, personally, I'm on the SCORE website all the time just because they've got incredible tools. And a lot of business owners or entrepreneurs just aren't aware of SCORE. So, sending them that information from SCORE's website. A lot of the services, the technical assistance that SCORE provides, we also provide. But in addition to that, we provide the access to capital, which SCORE does not provide.
Right.
So I think it's complementary, and some people work with us and they also work with SCORE, and we're very happy to share resources. And
Well, and it's really convenient in Burnsville because SCORE is offices with the Chamber of Commerce. So you've got both the Chamber and SCORE. You got it right handed to you on a silver platter if you're a small business.
I have a couple of questions. What's the average business size that you're helping? Like just sole proprietorships, one person, or?
that's a great question. I can't tell you off the top of my head, but I would say typically, when it's a 60-40 split with startups and existing, so startups, one or two owners, really. Usually we're talking about LLCs, versus a sole proprietorship. The bigger businesses that we work with, they're bigger, It's kind of like people take that leap and then they're all in. There was a business here in Burnsville that I was in touch with over the past couple of years that's a bigger manufacturing business, and they employ like 100 people. So I think that would kind of skew. Mainly, we work with the smaller businesses, I would say.
Gotcha. Thank you. And do you, how do you guys measure success of, your mission?
So when we think about success, there are a number of different kind of data points that we can track. How much time do we spend with businesses? What was the output of those meetings? Was a business plan created? Was a marketing plan created? Dollars out the door, when we think about our loan portfolio, making those loans and making sure people can repay those loans. What is our default rate? It's very, very, very low. We actually think maybe we should be taking more risk because our default rate is so low. How else do we measure success? We get and we track feedback from our clients. Like you saw that success story for every loan that we close. People do provide feedback on their experience, and a testimonial if they want to. We get feedback from the community too. I'm here in front of you all, and sometimes people share things, or they've heard of clients that have worked with us, and that's important, I think, for our success. And just, staying connected with the community and referrals, the fact that word of mouth is a huge source of our referrals, I think that speaks volumes. And, the connections in the community, particularly those bank referrals and the chamber, you know, that working relationship with the chamber, since they are kind of like the eyes and ears of what's going on in the business community, so.
Thank you. And last question, do you track any, help track like business success? Like people that you've helped, they're still in business 3 years later or that type of thing?
We did, I think maybe about 6 years ago, we paid to have a really big survey done of like this big look back of everyone that we've worked with, and we haven't done another one since then, but we do, if clients continue to work with us, we can see that data, you know, that historical data over time, and we collect updated information. And some of our funders, like DEED or the Department of Treasury, they're asking more questions about that, like how is this, you know, what is the long-term outcome of your work, and what's the story that it tells, you know? Sure, you're creating jobs, but are the wages going, you know, getting higher for people, factoring in inflation and the cost of living increases and things, like, are they good jobs that these businesses are creating? And who's, you know, what's the demographic makeup of the employees and things like that. So it's a lot of data for a small nonprofit organization to manage, but we are thinking about it and, you know, working with some consultants to try and update our internal system so that it's easier for us to track. But yes, we do, you know, collect that information from everyone new that we speak with, and then as relationships continue over time.
Thank you.
I think two important things that maybe haven't been mentioned tonight are that the services that Natalie and the folks at Open to Business provide are completely confidential. And so when Natalie showed the list of the types of businesses that she's spoken to versus like Trove that was mentioned and Asian Mart, those people consented to having their information provided in a public setting, whereas if you were a business that didn't want your information shared, all of that is completely confidential. Natalie doesn't share it with me. She'll ask questions if she needs to, and she'll provide my information to that business owner if they want to reach out, but it is completely confidential. And then just the other thing I think that's important to note is that the hours that she provides are kind of driven at the client's pace. And so if this is someone who has a lot of time to dedicate to their business or their entrepreneurial idea, that might have a different level of available time than someone who has a full-time job and a family or people that they care for, and this is kind of a side hustle or a weekend or night type opportunity that they're pursuing.
How many advisors are in the total group of the Open to Business?
We have 6, but I'm the only advisor for Dakota County, yes.
Natalie, thank you for that overview, and also I applaud the work that you do to help emerging businesses. It is sorely needed, so thank you for your service with that area. Just a couple of questions. In terms of the owner equity that is required, is there like a specific percentage that they have to come up with on their own up front, or what are the requirements on that end?
That is a great question. We underwrite a loan very similar to how a bank would in our process. So the owner does have to provide equity. We can't finance 100% of a project. I would say the absolute minimum that we could get would be 5%. We would like to see more like 10% because then they've really got, you know, skin in the game. But when you think about, you know, we do participate in a lot of SBA projects. Sometimes the SBA only requires 10%, and we're a gap financer, so we would come in with an additional 5%, and then the owner would provide equity of 5%. So in a structure like that, you know, they're contributing 5%. Our funding is factored in as equity as far as the SBA is concerned, but when the rubber hits the road, it would be 5%. Sometimes there are grant opportunities or other things that we can, you know, if they're struggling with the equity piece, we can layer that in, and that can help them get to their end goal a little bit faster.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And specifically when you're talking referrals from banks, and seeing the outreach, I presume that there are some other banks, seem like maybe some larger, more regional institutions that, you would really want to augment those conversations. When you're having these discussions, are you, receiving those referrals? Are you kind of directing folks to certain banks that may be more apt to, loan on a specific product or type of service that business is providing? How do you kind of navigate where they go? Because again, if, multiple no's, someone can get discouraged. So how do you kind of navigate what bank is basically right for them based off of your experience?
That's a great question too. So it's always good for people to shop around. So I will never just say like, you talk to this person at XYZ Bank. I'll say, here's a couple of bankers. I think you should talk to folks. It's got to be a good fit for everyone. People need to feel like they're getting listened to, that they could pick up the phone and talk to this person if an issue comes up. So it has to be a good fit. For me, based on where the project is, I think like geographically speaking, that's always important. So I kind of comb through my Rolodex, like, who's close to this project or what banks are local. The banks I mentioned on the slide were just banks that had locations in Burnsville that were kind of like hyper local, but we have a very long list of bank partners that we work with, and I would say the geographic aspect is important. Also, certain banks have different appetites for different types of deals, so we have some knowledge, about that, and because we've done economic development lending for a long time, so we kind of know who might be a good fit based on that.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, if that's everything, thanks, Natalie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on the agenda is a review of the draft for our 2024 EDC work plan, and that is going to be presented by Beth Weber, our Economic Development Specialist.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We've gone over a lot of great stuff tonight, and so I will try to be brief and concise. The first thing that we'll talk about tonight is your draft 2024 work plan. So each year we kind of go over the things that you're kind of assigned to review and provide commentary on, and what that looks like for us in 2024. So very high level, our existing economic development strategic plan goals are still in place. So we'll continue providing updates on those and working towards those. You did receive your open to business update tonight, and then as part of our strategic plan updates, at each meeting you would receive an update as well as relevant. There are times when trainings have come up that have been a good opportunity for you as commissioners to attend. Notably, in the past, we've had a ULI training, urban land use, and so it kind of helped understand the development side from a developer's perspective, and so that was a really good opportunity. We try to keep an eye out on things that might be relevant to you all, and then certainly as budget permits. We would ask that you continue reviewing financing applications for business subsidy. Continue reviewing and receiving updates on our Grow Minnesota Burnsville Chamber partnership, as well as reviewing and receiving updates on the city's business retention and expansion efforts. And then notably from tonight, maintaining an active engagement in our new economic development strategic framework, providing the valuable feedback and commentary that you did tonight, and then there will be future opportunities for additional conversations related to that as well.
I have a question.
Yes.
It says here, review financing applications. Is that, I haven't seen anything yet. Am I missing something?
You are not missing anything, no. So on occasion, or previously, we've had applications come through for tax increment financing, and that would be something that you would review as the Economic Development Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So these are kind of the pillars that we've identified that are consistent with previous years. and are consistent with the work that we anticipate you all to have kind of access to over the next year. But it is open to discussion, certainly if there are priorities that you feel that are important that maybe aren't encompassed in one of the existing items. I would welcome any discussion on that or questions.
Beth, I had a question that kind of got at something that came up in Tom's presentation earlier. So looking at number 2 of the action work plan, where it talks about improving the image of SD 191 in the city. Out of all the different tasks, that's the one where it kind of has a certain connotation to it, because it says improve. So you're identifying that there is something there's an impediment that needs to be improved upon. So I just wanted to ask, like, what was the origin of having that specific word? Because it seemed intentional, per se, in the work plan.
Yes, that's a great question. And admittedly, the development of this plan predates my employment here at Burnsville. But looking at kind of the school district and maybe some perceptions that people have about it, I think that was kind of the goal on maybe elevating and highlighting a lot of the great work that they're doing. And so from my perspective, as I've taken over my role here, I look at it more as a partnership opportunity on ways that we can help tell their story, ways that we can partner with the school district on perhaps different events and ways that our staff can get involved. And so I'll touch on a couple of the cool items that we've been able to work with them on when I get to my economic development strategic plan update and our next item. So, you know, we understand that wording maybe isn't as relevant as we would like it to be at this point in time, and certainly want to be mindful of the city's role and the level of importance that plays in economic development.
I thought that issue was brought up because of a survey of the people in the city. They were concerned about the school district. So I think that's maybe how that originated, if somebody remembers it differently.
And this was all established in a time where the school district was facing a really significant budget shortcoming and some really important sort of crisis decision-making that's now, 3 years in the past. And so maybe, what is needed is slightly different than what was needed then.
I'll just add, like, anecdotally, that as somebody who has kids who are school age and who's very recently looked at, like, the niche in great schools, like, grades that they'll assign to schools, they'll go by, like, how they're doing with diversity, how they're doing with test scores, student-to-teacher ratio, and they'll provide, like, a letter grade to each school or a school district as a whole. And I noticed when I was looking at that recently, like within the last year or two, that there's a weird disparity in the schools throughout our district in the letter grade that they get. And I know that a lot of folks will think about, if you're going to go, where am I going to send my kid to school? And you look up the grade school in your district that's closest to you and it's a letter C and you have the ability to send them elsewhere, then maybe you do. And then you also ask that question of, like, why is this one a C but the one a mile away is an A? So that's still something that impacts public perception that's still pretty relevant. So I'll just throw that out there as something I've seen.
Do we have access to the surveys? Because I was looking at the plan and it says identify household and population within the district and engage them on fact-based issues and impacts. So I'm assuming that's already been done, or?
I apologize, where was that pulled from?
So that's on the website, on the city's website, and it's your 2018 to 2020 plan. So
Gotcha.
I would assume that had been done since we're 6 years in the future, but maybe I'm
I can
overthinking
double
it.
check for you.
Okay.
I know that, I've been in communication with, Dr. Battles as well as Dr. Amoroso before her. And the, Dr. Amoroso and the chair of the school district board had asked me to come in and consult with them on the fact that when real estate agents, or when a house is up for sale in the city of Burnsville, real estate agents were giving prospective home buyers information on how to open and enroll outside of the Burnsville School District. And that was, so how could we overcome that and make sure that real estate agents didn't do something like that, that, okay, you're gonna sell a house in Burnsville, but sell them on Burnsville ISD 191 and the benefits of 191. And I think that both superintendents did an excellent job, and I think Teresa Battles is really doing a good job on trying to, upgrade the image of the Burnsville-Egan Savage School District.
But we don't necessarily know as a commission what that image is, at least from feedback.
I recall the public saying that they weren't,
I've heard the same
Happy
thing,
with
that
it.
they weren't happy with it, and
Right.
that they opt to send their kids somewhere
that's
else.
where this came from.
Yep.
But I could be missing something there, but.
I mean, yeah, like I said, in recent Google searches, that's the first thing that you're gonna see is that there's that disparity in what a perceived quality of the different schools in this district. And so if you're thinking about moving to Burnsville, or even if you, again, have that opportunity to send them elsewhere, those are gonna be the first things that inform your choices. And that's just Google. That's one of people's
And
first
I'm not
lines
sure
that they'll choose.
who's responsible for
Is that,
looking into that, if it's this group
Some of-
here?
some of
Or if
it's-
somebody else is doing that?
Some of
is that a
it's in-
state?
I've been
state
4 or 5
rating?
meetings, I don't remember talking about it.
I don't know who funds it. There's more than one website that does it, but I know it's impartial. They pull test scores, they'll review demographics, and just put together an overall rating, and they'll explain why. And so at the two websites are great schools and niche, and you can read what they say if you want.
So is it our charge to
If you
fix the school district, or is that somewhere else?
I think, and this is my own opinion, but after working in other cities, city government and school districts are two completely different organizations. And the city council has no control over the school district whatsoever.
I think the important thing maybe to note or to pull from conversations relating to the city and the school district are that we're both community partners of each other, and finding ways to support and elevate each other's messaging, not only previously but going forward, is important to make sure that accurate information is portrayed. The school district is doing a lot of really innovative things with their Pathways program, and students being able to graduate Burnsville High School with an associate's degree without having to leave Burnsville High School campus. And so that's really an asset to our community, and making sure that the city acts as a good community partner in those instances, I think is what's important to remember. And as it informs the economic development strategic framework, there will be a strong component of community engagement, not only with you all, with city council, with Burnsville business owners, and the community as a whole, learning what's important to them, what economic development means to them, and the things that they would like to see the city work towards as goals. So it's reasonable to assume that our current economic development goals will not be the same once this new framework is completed. And so for me personally, I'm really excited to complete this work, to have a really high level of ownership and investment in the next 5 years of my job here. So,
I'm sorry, you said that the goals would change as soon as the framework was completed?
presumably, I wouldn't want to presume that they'll stay exactly the same. Some of them might still be the same. There might still be a strong focus for the Burnsville Center area or heart of the city, or maybe folks will think heart of the city is doing great and we could focus our efforts somewhere else. And so we're really looking for the community as a whole to guide that, to help formulate, our next 5 years of work.
How does that framework get updated? Is it
That's what we're doing. So that's what Stantec is helping facilitate us do.
Oh, thank you.
So this was the kickoff tonight of kind of getting you that initial information. City Council received the same information at a work session in early February. And then there will be workshops for the community to participate in. There will be surveys. They'll be at a couple of events that we have, really engaging and meeting people where they're at to understand what's important to them as it relates to economic development.
So just so I'm clear, so this is the commission's work plan, so is this is in draft form, so is this set in stone in terms of the task, or is there kind of like, are you requesting our input in terms of anything, any modifications or any different directions that the commission would like to take over the next year? Just wanted to clarify.
It is not set in stone. This is just kind of the staff recommendation based on past year's work plans and what we identify as kind of your role as economic development commissioners, but certainly open to feedback. And then ultimately the work plans are presented to City Council, where they would have the ultimate decision-making over whether this would end up being your final work plan for the year.
I did notice that over the past year, we had a lot of conversations about programs for homeowners and those roles in economic development, and none of that work is really reflected on this punch list.
So the existing programming for housing and commercial is under our existing 5 goals. And so I would assume that would remain important, or it would be reasonable to assume that it would remain important, not only to you all, but the community and to City Council as well. And so you'll continue receiving updates on all of that. I just didn't want to put too many words on a slide. The full draft work plan is in the background attached with more detail.
Okay. Yeah, you busted me because I didn't have time to read it all.
That's okay.
I don't want to belabor the point, Beth, but I just feel like, that our terminology, especially in our work plan, I think says a lot about the direction that the commission wants to take, and also our view of the community that we live in. And there's just the connotation of, improving the image of the school district. Now, you've mentioned a couple of times, there was a couple of words that you kept harping. I think it's really important to you in terms of building, in terms of partnerships. Mm-hmm. And I think when you say that, we as want to improve your image, because you mentioned that we're separate organizations, there's kind of a disjointedness that may not necessarily foster partnerships per se. Now, mind you, this is just a work plan, but this is a documented work plan that will dictate the commission's work. So, I don't want to harp on one particular word or phrase, but I do think something
you're right.
more of a partnership language would be more effective and really kind of better work going forward a little bit better.
That's a really good point too. If, part of what our work could be is encouraging new partners and vendors within the community as a part of economic development that could partner with the school district. And if improve is in there, it doesn't really give that confidence to partnership that we want to be able to give to new partners.
Like a liaison to the school, report back to the council, for example.
I think that's interesting. Because we're here with real, I'll say at least myself, no real knowledge of how we got here. We're going to look into where did that come from? Where did goal number 2 come from? What's the survey data? But assumedly they did it, and they put purpose behind improve. And at least anecdotally, and anecdotal is only as good as it carries, it sounds like there is a need for improvement. So you're right, William, that the language choice is very important. I'd like to learn more to see if improve is the right word. Maybe partner is a more apropos word, or maybe improve is really the word that we should stick with, back to your point that real estate agents are not recommending our own school district to people buying houses here. That's kind of a problem, I'd say.
We're putting this down, and I've seen it a year ago, and this is probably the next time we talked about it was tonight. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All great comments. Just as a point of clarity, the improving the image of the school district and the city is one of the existing 5 goals. And so we wouldn't necessarily be looking to change the wording of that in our existing plan, but being mindful of how we could phrase a future goal, just as a point of clarity. And how that would translate into what will be the new framework that Stan Tech is helping facilitate.
And as I recall Tom's slide, the date on the final draft was like into the late summer. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, maybe just a final comment on the school district. The mayor of Burnsville has a CEO forum that meets on a quarterly basis. And, so there's always the superintendent of schools as a part of that CEO forum, as well as leaders of major businesses and minor businesses within the city. So you get, you might get for instance, the president of Inver Hills Community College will be a part of that, as well as the managing director for Xcel Energy, Dakota Electric, Collins Avionics, and smaller businesses. So every time in that forum, then there's a round table, and I'm a part of the forum. That's why I can comment on it with a lot of clarity. Is that every time Dr. Battles will talk about what the school district is doing, and Beth mentioned their pathways. Beth mentioned the fact that in Burnsville High School, you can graduate Burnsville High School with an associate's degree in college. So, they're doing a lot. Can they do more? Of course, we can all do more and try to better ourselves. But to think that the school district in Burnsville is sitting on their hands is wrong. They're doing a lot.
I think my concern is that it's in like a punch list for us to do, but, I'm curious as to why it's there, because we don't really do anything with that, other than promote the school without knowing a lot about it.
So if memory serves, at the inception of our existing strategic plan, it sounds like there was maybe some sort of dot exercise where people placed a value of importance of things, and then the top 5 things that were ranked then became our current goals. And so as we look to formulate the new strategic framework, as I've said, those goals will very likely change. So, we're working with the goals that we have now, and then certainly with all of the feedback from you and the community, is how we will develop the new framework, with certainly inclusive language and encompassing the broad array of stakeholders and people who live here and business owners and all of that.
And just a refreshed perspective. We're in a different place.
Absolutely.
than
5
we were
years is
then.
a long time.
Yeah.
So a lot of things have happened, and it's certainly reasonable that priorities would shift and new ideas would come out, and we want to make sure that we're supporting that and reflecting that in our work.
In the PowerPoint that I referenced, that was from 2020, and it's the Burnsville Economic Development and Redevelopment Strategic Plan 2018 through 2020. It's a 30-page PowerPoint available on the city's website. It lists a number of strategies, actions, and tactics. Would it be appropriate to ask that we kind of get an update on how have we been executing the actions and tactics?
Certainly. The strategic plan updates that I provide at each meeting with kind of the things that we've accomplished in each goal are kind of a way that we measure that, so to speak. But if there's more comprehensive information that I could maybe take a look at to see if that would be or provide meaningful information to y'all, I can certainly look into that.
Yeah, I think back to Ed's point on a work plan. A work plan is, well, I don't know, frankly, not that useful if you don't know what we've been working on. And I'm, of course, new,
Sure.
but I think that it seems like there's kind of and I don't want to speak for anyone else, but maybe a lack of clarity as to what is occurring, at least.
All right.
You're
Should
looking
focus on
for a
having goals
scorecard.
that we can
Sure.
achieve.
A scorecard
rather
is a
than
great,
just
I mean,
posting them on a piece of paper.
because we're gonna go through this, the city's gonna go through this process with Stantec, and if we change the goals as appropriate, that's great, but if we're not, I'm really not trying to be harsh, but if we're not executing the current goals we have, I mean, why would we think changing the goals would lead to anything?
I wonder if, we listen to the next part of the agenda, which is the update that is going to tell us what we've been doing, just to make sure that, perhaps we should have done that first, and then you would know. But I think Beth typically in her updates does a pretty good job of sharing with us what has been going on and what has been done for economic development. So maybe we revisit what additional information you need after we get that update.
That sounds great.
Cool.
Okay, we'll move to the update. So some new and exciting things happening in the Burnsville shopping area 42 corridor. The Sears portion of the Burnsville Center is under new ownership. There's no official plans that we've received, but we are in close communication with them, and making sure that, open lines stay there, so that we can provide the support that they need, and make sure that, no one has any questions. Mind's Eye Comics will be moving into the Burnsville Center. They're going to be opening April 13th, so that's an exciting addition for our local business owner, Eric Childs. And then this week we celebrated the opening of Chase Bank, which is on the corner of County Road 42 and Aldrich. It's the former FedEx location, so it's a really beautiful branch, and it was exciting to be able to meet the team that they have working there, and to help welcome them to our community.
I do want to add one thing. I heard through the grapevine that several truckloads of new carpet tiles were delivered to Burnsville Center, which just feels like a really basic measure of, oh, somebody's interested in this property for a minute and they're actually looking to the future of what it could be, and they're taking a little bit of care for it in a way that maybe other property owners were not always focused on. So
It was more than one truckload. It was
Yeah.
3 truckloads, I believe.
3 truckloads is what I heard too. So
What circles do you run in that you find
I
out how
run
many
in
truckloads?
all the circles. I'll tell you all about it.
Look forward to that.
I actually was there today in preparation for this meeting, and I walked through, and the one thing I note, because I'd taken grandkids there last year, it's cleaner. It's much cleaner than it has been
Yeah.
in a long time.
The shifts in
So,
ownership
yeah, you
have
can see it.
shifted the mindset of what they're looking for in the property. And that is showing in the businesses that I know that are considering
Moving,
taking a space there.
right?
Yeah.
We talk to the new ownership very frequently, and it's really exciting to hear their ideas, and the investment that they're proposing in the mall and just the kind of surrounding area with the food hall and the grocery store. So some of the ownership overlaps, and it's really excited to hear what they've been working on. Talking more about the school district, the city has had the opportunity to host, more than once actually, students from a nonprofit organization that mentors young teens. So each city hosted a table and or a vehicle for the students to kind of investigate, learn what each department does, check out a snowplow, an ambulance. And it's a way to connect them to what local government does and the variety of jobs that we have here. We have office jobs, we have golf course jobs, we have snowplow jobs, we have fleet maintenance. There's all kinds of things for students to be considering as they're looking at career paths. And so I think this most recent time was the 3rd time that we've hosted them. So you'll see me pointing at a map of the Burnsville Center area, and then I have the plan set for the new Fire Station 1, just kind of highlighting what community development does as a whole. So not just what I do in my economic development role, but what our planners do, and what our building department does as it comes to new construction review. So it's a really exciting thing whenever they're able to come to the city and hang out for a couple hours. And then city staff also had the opportunity to volunteer as a community helper at Gideon Pond. They hosted a winter craft day, and we were invited to help facilitate those winter-themed art projects for students that maybe didn't have family that was able to attend. And that was a really fun experience for those of us that got to go. So I spent about an hour there one afternoon, and it was a really positive experience.
Can I add another thing here too?
Yes.
Just because it's so relevant to the issues that were brought up in other times during this meeting. One of the things that happened not very recently, so it didn't make this report, but within the last year was the chamber and the city, and I think even the school district joined together to host a CPE for real estate agents so that they could entice agents to come and learn more about Burnsville. They're going to get their own professional credits that they need for their own professional credentials, but also, you know, it gives them an opportunity to get that stronger personal connection to the shareholders in the Burnsville community. So when they are selling a home in Burnsville, they've got a more personal look at how the shareholders in, or the stakeholders in Burnsville operate. So it was just really relevant.
Thank
to
you.
other
Yeah, that was a SPAR
issues.
accredited event that the school district, chamber, and city partnered on to put on. Don't quote me on this. I want to say there was about 50 realtors that showed up, so it was a really great turnout. And we were able to share not only about the school district, but how the chamber supports businesses and how the city kind of supports all of those functions as well. So it was a really great event.
Just when we're talking practical, like really working toward the goals, that's a really good example that didn't make this cut because it's not in the last 2 months, it was in the last year or so.
Yeah. And I've previously hosted a few non-credited realtor events, just kind of pop-ups to help teach realtors what's going on in Burnsville, things going on at the school district, about our community gardens and things like that. So try to find ways to share messaging for everybody, certainly. Continuing with development in Heart of the City. So MWF has been very active in Heart of the City. So the red triangle is all land that they have developed, and then the green triangle is what they're currently developing. The fuchsia square shape is on the Diamond Head property, and that is for an apartment project as well. So really exciting movement in Heart of the City, specifically by MWF most recently. And then additionally, just across 13 off of Nicollet, Fox Den Board Game Cafe is open. That was a ribbon cutting that we attended. Probably the most well-attended ribbon cutting that I've ever been to, in addition to all the folks that are in that photo. I would say there was probably at least another 50 people in the crowd, ready to play their games, dressed up in costume, excited to order some coffee and just hang out for the day. So I've talked to several staff members here at the city who have gone and have really enjoyed their experience, enjoyed their coffee. You can buy games, you can bring a game to play at a table, and it's a really family-friendly environment. So we're excited that they were able to open up here in Burnsville. Continuing to build awareness around the city's existing housing and commercial programs. We are still working with the Center for Energy and Environment, and amazingly in 2023, 16 rebates were issued, and 85 visits were completed. So as a refresher, the visits include kind of an energy audit of your home. The city pays for half of the cost, and then the homeowner pays for the other half. The cost of those, I believe, is $35 and $50. And so it's a really great way for Burnsville homeowners to kind of have an audit of their home. We've heard about our open to business update. Sounds like Natalie maybe had a couple higher numbers than I did, but again, an extremely valuable service that she provides, not only with the technical assistance, but also with the access to funding, and extremely thankful for the partnership that we have with them. I don't know if it was noted in her presentation, but it is a free service to residents and business owners of Burnsville. So the city pays a fee in partnership with the Dakota County CDA. So there is no cost for folks to utilize that service. And then also tonight, Stantec kicked off the housing and commercial study, as well as the economic development strategic frameworks, just with some high-level information to get it fully introduced to you all. And so that was a great introduction. Continuing the city's position as a regional destination, I was fortunate to be able to attend the EDAM Winter Conference. So that's the Economic Development Association of Minnesota, where I'm able to take education courses, creative funding opportunities, network with other economic development professionals, and really learn about the innovative ways that other people are handling economic development in the surrounding area. And then we also had a lot of ribbon cuttings: Panda Express, Foxden, Foundational Fitness, Jamba Juice and Auntie Annie's, and then most recently Chase Bank.
And you invite each and every one of us to those ribbon cuttings, correct?
I do, yes.
Yeah. And I would hope that you would all try to make a ribbon cutting in the future. I don't know if, some of you don't,
They're
you're
very
not around
challenging
during the
if you
daytime
have
when you're having 'em.
job.
But if you're in the city during these ribbon cuttings, it's well worth it, and it shows the prospective, the business owner that's opening up, how much we care for them.
And they're in partnership with the Burnsville Chamber, who has been talked about several times tonight. We do have a good relationship with them, and they coordinate ribbon cuttings for Burnsville businesses. And so we're certainly thankful for that partnership and allows us to celebrate the economic development growth in the city. So that's the last goal update. I guess circling back to what Commissioner Brahms had said earlier, if that provided any additional clarity on the work plan, and if we're kind of comfortable with the phrasing of how it sits now, understanding, that our existing goals are what they are, knowing that the future framework will allow for whatever, kind of the community dictates as we move through that process. So welcome any questions on the work plan, as well as questions on the goals that I just provided updates on.
Thank you for providing those updates. That was great to hear about all those exciting things that the city's been involved in. I think there's still frankly a need to see the metrics on how we've been successful in executing our goals over the last several years. They're pretty well enumerated, the different metrics, and so I would hope that we'd have that data readily at hand. That's an important part of executing towards goals. If there's not measurement along the way, then you don't really have goals, you have aspirations. And I'm happy to send you that PowerPoint if.
I have
Okay.
it. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding where you're pulling it from.
Yep.
She reads it every day while she has her first cup of coffee just to get in the game.
It's printed on my desk.
There's maybe, I don't know if there's maybe a project for someone who isn't Beth to do, because all of these meetings are recorded and filed online, and so all of these updates that Beth has provided are, they're available. You can see them for any particular time frame, and I don't have time to do that either. But there could, there's potentially, a compilation based upon the timeframes that we hold these meetings, where you can see sort of the progress of these updates, not numerically maybe like you're asking for, but you can see sort of like, we did this kind of stuff in this quarter of the year, and then we did this kind of stuff, and you can kind of have that holistic view that you haven't been able to have since you haven't been at more meetings and received more updates, but the meetings are available.
Yeah, I think, what I'm referring to is, for example, Goal 1, ensure sustainability of the Burnsville Shopping Center, CR 42 corridor. The performance metrics are property valuation increase in mall and surrounding area, new business starts, remodels, public reinvestment of infrastructure and/or public-private partnerships, number and type of building permits and valuation.
I think I would also just argue that 5 years is maybe not that meaningful of data for, like, property valuation, for example, because if we just set the goal 5 years ago for the Burnsville Shopping Center, then that's still quite a lot of time that we need to find the right businesses that we put in there. It's a long-term goal. And so I'm not sure how much a change in property valuation would tell us with this short of an interval from when we set the goal, if that makes sense.
I think it'd be substantial, frankly. I mean, someone's put a lot of effort into identifying the metrics that we wanted to be able to assess our strategies and how we are implementing. And so, I mean,
Yeah, I'm not saying that
certainly
the
they should have
data,
it.
I'm not saying that the data doesn't exist. I'm just wondering if there's more of like a grain of salt that we would take current data and maybe we see, yeah, there is that sort of growth, but we can also see that in a non-numerical way by the number of businesses that we're seeing coming in with the regular updates that we receive. And then we have that sort of long-term idea of seeing, does this continue? I see what you're asking for. I also just say that there's sort of like non-numerical ways to get similar information.
Different, but I mean, I get your point, but, I guess I'm just looking for the numbers.
We can certainly look into a different or more meaningful way to convey that to all of the commissioners, as kind of perhaps a recap of, as we close out these goals, and maybe the success with which we executed them.
That'd be great.
Okay?
Okay. Is there anything else with the update?
No updates, just kind of direction on what's on your screen now as it relates to the work plan, because this is what Commissioner Brahms would be presenting to City Council as your kind of identified list of things to be working on for 2024. Understanding, that the metrics would be coming, but aren't necessarily a work plan item for you all to execute.
All right. If we don't have any comments on that.
Okay, that's totally fine. Just some final updates. We do have a development map, which Kevin in our department updates and maintains. It highlights all of the development projects that are reviewed by Planning Commission and ultimately voted on by City Council. So I encourage you to check that out. As of right now, our next meeting would be scheduled for May 8th. And then certainly, as always, to reach out with questions or concerns, comments on anything that you think of later tonight when you're driving home. I'm here, I'm the staff liaison, and certainly want to make sure that you have everything that you need to make informed decisions in your role as commissioners here.
So Beth, quick question.
Yes.
On the development map, I looked on it, but there's a new development going up in the parking lot, the southeast corner, where LA Fitness is.
Okay.
What is that? I don't see it on the map.
It's not on the map because it was able to meet all of the city code requirements and was able to be approved administratively, which is really exciting. So it didn't require review by Planning Commission or City Council. But to share, that will be a Cafe Zupa's restaurant with a drive-through.
Okay, thank you.
That is very exciting.
There has been a lot of excitement about it, yes.
I'm very, happy to see that corner is coming. And reaching back to some of our discussions, that's taken a long time. In terms of, time where that was, the Cub store and that whole corner is really starting to come back, and it's really encouraging to see.
Yeah, the construction fencing is up at Cub. Cub is completely
Oh, they're
closed.
going, yeah.
So, yeah, it'll be exciting to watch that go up.
Now if we can just get Mr. B's under control. We
Mr.
thought
B's.
looking at a dumpy gas station was bad, and now looking at a gravel pit is not better. Not better.
They are working through the process with our
Yes.
building and planning departments.
Do we have any more questions or comments?
Just did we, just a quick question, did we have to take action? Because I saw on the agenda, it says recommend adoption of the draft plan? Do we have to do that now? It says action requested, or we don't need to do anything. There's no vote required?
We didn't for the planning commission. You can. It's
Not necessary.
yeah. We didn't for planning commission.
Okay.
So
You want to?
No, I don't need to.
Okay.
It's just a question.
They don't have to come back after you're going home.
Would you like me to move to adjourn the meeting?
Yes, I would love that.
Okay, I move to adjourn the meeting.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Abstained? Great, the motion is carried. And we can go ahead and end it now. All right.